Hello and welcome to another Digital Dimensions CADcast on what's new for SOLIDWORKS 2013. My name is Maurice Cherian and I'm your host. Today we're going to be talking about SOLIDWORKS routing, including piping, tubing, and electrical routes. I'll go ahead and get started with the agenda. So I'm going to break this up into what's new for on the piping side, then go into tubing, and then electrical. So I'm first going to go over the new route along existing geometry, which is a new function in auto route, and it also does work on tubing routes too. You can add an angled section called a slope in a pipe route. That's new for 2013. And then go over some of the enhancements for pipe penetrations. Then I'll show the new drawing functionality for tubing routes, very similar to what was available on pipe routes before. And then show you how you can read in piping and instrumentation diagram information for tubing, not just for pipes anymore. Then I'm going to go into some of the new electrical route functionality, including what you can do now to modify flattened routes, and then show you some of the nice new enhancements for creating ribbon cable routes, including being able to make folded and flexible type of routing at the same time, and it's more freeform than it was before. Then I'm going to go over the design table validation when you're creating a routing component, which applies to all three different types of routing components. I'll go into pipe routes first. Now there's this new functionality called route along existing geometry, which is going to speed up the process of creating routes because you won't have to zoom in and zoom out so much when you're creating routes, because you can just pick a face and offset the end of a pipe route off of faces. In this case it could be walls or floors or ceilings. And then I'm going to go over the ability to add a slope, which is an angled pipe section where the elbows will bend and change accordingly for the angle of the sloped route section. And then go over the new enhancements for pipe penetration. Pipe penetrations can now be removed. They can also be replaced with an elbow, so I'll show you that. So let's go into SOLIDWORKS and show you this new functionality on the piping side. This assembly here has several pipe routes and some tubing routes, so we'll use it to show the different types of new functionality available. Now I already have started a pipe route over here, and we'll go ahead and edit the route. So the first thing I'm going to show you is inside of Edit Route. Now one of the nice things here when you go into Auto Route, and this is available for tube routes too, this is new, Route Along Geometry. They had something similar before, but it wasn't an actual button here, and it's a little bit more functional and easier to use now. Now it's actually in the Property Manager dialog box. So Route Along Geometry, and what you have to do is you pick a start point. So you pick a point on the route, and then you pick a planar face. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the start point. I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see it. I'm going to pick the floor, so any planar face will work. And what's going to happen is whatever value is here, this offset, is going to control the distance between the endpoint and the floor here. And I can change that value, and I can change the value for every single piece that I select. And then I can just keep going. I pick the point. In this case, I'll pick this wall to the left here, and it will automatically put that 300 millimeter offset here. And then I can just keep going with this route, pick the point, and I'll zoom out so you can see the back wall here. And it's going to put a 300 millimeter offset off of that back wall here. And then finally, I'll go and start the route on the other side here. So you can see here's where it started. So I'll select endpoint, floor, and again you can see I can change that value if I want to. And I'll just keep going. I'll pick that point again, and I'll pick the back wall. And then you'll see the route, and then finally I'll go in here and just use the normal auto route function and just connect these 2 points together. And then you can see now I just quickly put the route together without having to zoom around and zoom in and out a lot to get that geometry placed very quickly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to finish the route. So I'm going to finish the route here. And now what I like to do is I like to show this. I usually like to isolate the route to show this better. So now you can see what I've done. And with the isolate command, this was new 2 releases ago. It gave you the ability to pick the different types of routes. So I'll go ahead and say route and direct references. And you can even save these as display states. And now, if I look at this, you'll be able to see, if I go back and I'll edit the route so you can see it better, you will see all those values. You can see here's a 300 here. And you can see the 300 in the back there. So you can see you can quickly route. You can quickly route along the walls here. So that's going to really help speed up the process when you're routing large piping and tubing type of routes here. The next thing I'm going to be going over now is how to create a slope. So I'm going to add a slope to this pipe section right here. So I'm going to edit the route again. And this slope can be sloping down or up. And all you have to do is right click on a segment, a line segment. While you're editing the route, pick a line segment, and then you'll see a new function called add slope. And this is one of the new things that has been added for 13. And when you pick it, it's going to ask you 2 questions. It's going to ask you what your gravity plane is going to be. So in this case, I'll pick the floor. And then I'll pick a start point. And this is going to determine if it's going to bend up or if it's going to bend down. So I'll show you how you can see the different values here. So in this case, I'll have it bend down, so it'll be going down as it goes closer to the wall. And then if I change the units here, the units determine the angle. I got it at 1.91 degrees. As I change the units here, it'll change this. I'll leave it at the 1.91. And what will happen is it'll adjust the angle of the elbow here, so there's not going to be a gap or a problem with the elbow. And now you can see what it's going to look like. If I right click on it, I can remove that slope, or I can edit the slope. If I want to edit it, I can change that value there. So now that new slope functionality is pretty nice. You can quickly add a slope segment or section to your pipe route very quickly. The next thing I'm going to show is on pipe penetration here. So I'm going to go ahead and edit that new route that I had just created. So I edit the route, and you were able to put in a pipe penetration before, but now I can add a pipe penetration and I can swap it with a T, or I can quickly remove it if I needed to. So when you first create a pipe penetration, what you need to do is you need to draw a line and have it coincident with the existing line segment of the route. And when I first create it, I'm going to go ahead and run this along the X direction. And I need to make sure that it is coincident here. So I'll turn on the sketch relations for a second. And so you can see it is coincident there. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a flange. And I can pick different sizes here. And this happens to be the same size, but if I wanted to, I could have a reducing one here too. Now, when I right click on the point, this is how you create a pipe penetration. This was available in previous releases, but what wasn't available before is when you create the pipe penetration, you can now remove the penetrate if you want to. That wasn't available before. And then the other functionality that's nice about this is that now, if I go into T's here, if this was reducing, I can pick a reducing T, or I'll pick, in this case, a straight T. And if I drop it right on top of this, right where that point is, it'll add that in. And what it does is it removes the penetrate and replaces it with the T. So that's some of the new functionality that's available to you in a pipe route. Now let's go back to the slides. Now I'm going to go into what's new for tubing. So you can now quickly create a drawing. Just like you could create a pipe drawing, you can now create a tube drawing by just selecting one button, and it'll automate the drawing process. And then also you can now read in tubing system information into piping and instrumentation diagram files. You can read that information in for tubing, not just piping. So I show here on the 2012 side, you'll see that the piping system was the only thing available, and now you can bring in tubing and piping. And I'll show what the dialog box looks like on that next. Now I'm going to go back to SOLIDWORKS and show you some of this tubing functionality. I'm going to open up this panel so we can see some of the components in here, the regulators and air filters here. So I'm going to go over to the piping and instrumentation diagram box here where we can actually read in. We import in information, and you'll see here now when I import this data, and I can go to piping, tubing is the new one here. Piping was already there. Here's tubing, and you can see it'll show the different routes in here. It does show on the bottom here what fittings you need to have in place. You can even select which ones have already been placed. So you can see here this tubing one. If I hit process tube, it'll show which parts need to be routed, and then you can route these, and then you can use guide curves to actually route the existing geometry by using the guide curves to create the actual pipe routes. So that's some of the new functionality there on the PIND ability to import in piping and instrumentation diagram information. I want to show you the drawing information, or show you how to quickly make a drawing with the tube route. I'll create a new route, and I'll start a new route over here. And I'll run the route over to this connection point over here. And I'll use an orthogonal route. So I'll go ahead and accept this one. Now the new functionality for 2013 is this ability to create a new tube drawing. So I'm going to exit the route, and I'm going to still be editing the assembly, the subassembly, and then I'll show you the new functionality for the tube route here. Once I exit the sketch to get out of the edit route mode, now I'm going to go over to the new functionality. In this case, for tube drawing, just like there's a pipe drawing, now I'm going to click on that. And now you can see I can pick my different size sheet here. And I'll take the defaults with everything turned on here, so then you can see what the drawing is going to look like. So it definitely speeds up the process, streamlines the process when you're creating drawings. You can still add some dimensions and detail it out further, but now you can see what it's going to look like here. And now you can see it even put the balloons in here. It shows the different lengths, and you can add more information here. Has the stub links on the connectors and things like that. So it very quickly details as much of it as it can. And you can also see below, you can see it puts together a nice bill of material. Just like when you create a weldment cut list, you want to know the lengths of the individual pieces of the tube, and you can see that here. And you can see very easily one button gets a lot of information here. So that's some of the new functionality that is available to you on the tubing side of routing. So I'll now go back to the slides. So on piping and tubing, there's now enhanced support for exporting pipe and tube data. So I'll go back to SOLIDWORKS and show that. So how do you export data, exporting pipe and or tube data? You just right click on a route in the assembly from the feature tree, and then you can just go to export pipe and tube data. And what's been enhanced here is this pipe data format, this PCF format now has more types of routing components, including coverings, supports, and fitting data, in this case fitting center point data. So more of this is available in isogen applications, so that PCF format has now more things it supports. I'm going to go back to the slides again. Now the next thing I want to show you is, this is generic. This is going to be for all types of routes, in this case piping, tubing, and electrical routes. There's now a validation check, and this validation check is geared towards components that have design tables. Some electrical clips have design tables, and in particular all the pipes that are used in piping routes, some of them have several configurations. Some have several hundred configurations, usually inside a design table. So what it does is this validation check goes through the design table and makes sure that it is complete and there's no missing information needed. So I'm going to go back over to SOLIDWORKS. In this case, I'll open up the pipe component that is used to create most of the pipe routes that everybody uses when they're doing standard pipe routes inside of SOLIDWORKS. Now, how do you get to the routing library manager? You just click on routing. Here's routing tools. Here's routing library manager. Or if you go to tools, options, if you go to routing, you can see here's a routing file locations. And here you can also get to that routing library manager. Now you can see the routing library manager. It has several tabs, and the one they added the enhancement to is the routing component wizard. I'm going to go ahead and pick piping. So I'll select pipe in this example, but this would also apply to other components like clips, and there are a few others that can use the different design tables to set up the configurations. So I'll click on next, and now you'll see in here the new tab is right after part validity check. It's called design table check. Now this component's already set up, so I'm just going to go to the new function so you can see it. And now it has a lot of information it needs in here, and what it's going to do is it's going to validate the part. And in this case, everything's fine with this component because it's already been in use, and this is one that's provided for in the software. Here's the new functionality. The design table check, when I click next, it will actually open up the design table and look at certain components in here and make sure that everything is in there correctly and there's no errors and there's nothing missing. And once it's done going through this, you can see it's actually opened up the Excel database here, in this case the design table that was already created, and here's the new functionality. So you can see everything is now green. It went through the design table, it verified everything it needed. In this case there was nothing missing or any typos, so I can continue on and then create this pipe or clip or any other kind of component, and it won't have any missing information in the design library table. Now let's go back to the slides. So the last thing I'm going to go through is what's new for electrical routing in 2013. And I'll start with improvements on flattened routes, in this case for annotation routes, and for manufacturing nail board or form board routes. You can now actually show the spacing of or change the angles of fanned out segments. So when you have multiple wires coming from one location or one junction, you can space it out and change the angle. And then the other big improvement was when you move a route on a drawing, now the connector tables stay attached. That was something that you'd have to manually move them around. And so that's a nice enhancement to something that will definitely save you some time when you're trying to show a drawing of an electrical wire route. And then the last thing is pretty neat because you can now create more freeform ribbon cable routes. You can now mix folded and flexible routes by using a spline or lines. So you do have a little bit more sketch functionality now, and you can use some sketch relations. It was very limited before. So, and there also is handles, which are very similar to using the sketch or triad to control the twisting and the bending of a ribbon cable route. So now I'll go into SOLIDWORKS and show you what's new for the electrical side of routing. So I have a wire route that has several wires going to a single point. Now when I go into flatten a route, this works for either annotation or manufacturing routes. In this case, I'll show it for annotation. This is the one that's not scaled. This isn't the form board or nail board scaled one. I'll create the annotation route here before I bring it into the drawing. Now what you'll see is when I right click on this, I go into edit flatten route, and now the new functionality that's been added is this fan out. So when I click on fan out, it wants me to pick a section. So I'll zoom in so you can see it a little bit better here. I picked up the section, one of the fan out pieces, and now I can change the angle of all the fanned out pieces, or I can change the spacing. So changing the spacing, making this more spread out, usually helps people be able to see this a little bit better. And all I have to do now is hit apply, and now it's going to change the spacing here, and I'll go ahead and accept that. And now I'll show you what it looks like when you put this onto a drawing. Now if I go back to flatten route again, now I'll go ahead and make the drawing so you can see it. Now you can see how the fan out is here. Now you can see the fan out. Now also it has the two connector block tables here. It tells you the wires and the pins. So now what's been enhanced is you see these two connector blocks here. Whenever I move this around, the actual dimensions move and the blocks move. So that was a big enhancement because they did not move once it was placed. So if you move these around, now they're going to move accordingly. So that's a big, nice enhancement there. Finally, the last thing to show you is the new enhanced functionality of ribbon cable routing. You used to have to be stuck with either selecting folded or flexible cable routes, ribbon cable routes. Now you can use a combination of both. You do get some of the sketch tools available to you. In this case, the line and spline tools available. You can add points too for reference. The handles are very similar to what you would see when you use a Sketcher Triad. And you can use the Sketcher Triad handles to control the twist and bending of a flexible ribbon cable route. So let me go ahead and show you that functionality in SOLIDWORKS. So I'm going to start the route like I normally would here. I'm going to add a connector. In this case, it's a ribbon cable connector. And once I select it, I'll save the route, and then it's going to start to show the stub here. Once it shows the stub, then I can move on and start to add other connectors if I want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit of the combination of what you can do here. Now before, you would be stuck with folded or flexible, and you wouldn't be able to get out of this button or this property manager without getting kicked out of the 3D sketch. Now I can go ahead and edit or go to manual sketch. I can even close this out, and now you can see I have things available to me like the line, spline, and point. Now before, I would have to get out of the 3D sketch completely when I turned off or closed out of the auto route function. Now I'm in a 3D sketch, and this is very, very familiar and very similar to what people that use pipe routes are used to. You draw lines in 3D space here, and then what it does is it automatically puts in this case, it puts in the bend radius for you there. It puts in the bends for you automatically. And this is where I'm going to show the folded functionality. Now it's a little bit hard to see. I'm going to rotate this a little bit so you can see it better. So you can see some of the folding effect here. I'll move this over a little bit. So you'll see you can see it's running it like it's a folded route. Now here's where the fun starts is now I can go ahead and pick a spline here, and I can run a spline. In this case, I'll start it off of this end point here. and I can show some bending here, and I can put a few points in here. And now you can see what it's going to look like. I can adjust this. This is a little bit of a harsh bend in there, so now you can see I can move that. I can show the sketch relations and show you the tangencies that are here. Now what's neat about this is that now I can click on these and I can show the ability to twist and bend this geometry here. So this was not available before. When you had a folded route, you were either stuck with a folded or a fixed, and now I can pick on these handles and I can put in some of that twist. I recommend going still in baby steps, making sure that the geometry is going to be created correctly once you get out of the sketch, because it does have a lot of things it has to think about. And if you see the red and white with the white inside here, that means that it did solve the route okay, and it didn't have any problems with it bending too sharp or having some other trouble with the geometry folding up on itself. So you can see the fold and the flexible combined here. Nice new functionality that a lot of people are going to like if you make ribbon cable routes. Now if I go back in here, I can go back in here and edit the route, and now I can come and select these points. I usually turn off the auto route so I can see this a little bit better. Click on one of these points here, and now if I wanted to, and I'll twist it back a little bit the other way. So you can see you can always come back and modify it. In 2012 and 11 and other releases, you would pick this point out here to control the handle. Now what you do is now you pick that center, and then you have this triad functionality like you're using the Sketcher triad. Again, try not to move it too much. Make sure that when you get out of the sketch, the ribbon cable stays in place or stays intact. If you see a clear section in here, that means that it wasn't able to solve it. So again, you can see folded and flexible, and you have control now of those handles with a Sketcher triad type of tool. That's going to do it for this CADcast. Thanks for watching. My name is Maurice Cherian. Please visit our website at ddicad.com for more CADcast and tech tips. Thank you.